10 July 1945. Würzburg, American Zone, Bavaria. In a notebook covered with dust, a civilian writes one sentence that could not be spoken aloud. We changed the seals, not the hands. He signs only with initials. KW. The city around him is a shell. Würzburg was destroyed on 16 March 1945 in one night. Firestorms erased streets and names. The residents survived in outline. Whole neighborhoods did not. The mathematicians of rubble called it 90% destroyed. The Trümmerfrauen, women with scars and scarves, sorted stone from ash by hand. They stacked bricks like prayer beads. The language of survival is short. One bucket, one ladder, one loaf. The Americans have posted curfews. There are hours when no one can be outside. There are hours when hunger is louder than orders. There is fear of retribution. There are rumors about prison being safer than the streets. There are rumors about suicides in cellars. There are rumors about suicides of judges. Carl Westermann is 33. His hands are uncut. He has the posture of a man trained to stand at a lectern. He carried a briefcase for the state when the state called itself Reich. He learned how to say the word treason in an office with brown curtains. His first months after surrender are a ledger. He writes lists of missing relatives. He writes lists of his cases. He keeps account of calories. He keeps account of lies that must be told to stay alive. The arithmetic of loss is simple. One apartment, gone. One mother, gone to the country, alive. One wife staying with in-laws in a village outside Kitzingen. One job erased by an order pinned to a door. One party membership card burned. One photograph of a court that no longer exists. He will not say his previous job aloud. He will write it once in pencil, then scratch it out. The People's Court, the Volksgerichtshof. He was not one of the men who shouted sentences with cameras rolling. He was one of the men who drafted indictments in rooms without windows. He read files with neat handwriting that ended in a single line, death. He will not decide now whether he is a villain or a clerk, a believer or a follower. He will count. He will add and subtract as if numbers could make a story. The immediate aftermath is both chaos and accounting. The Allies enter the city and take records if records exist. In Würzburg, many records did not survive. In Berlin, on 3rd of February 1945, an air raid collapsed the ceiling of a courtroom and killed the president of the People's Court. Roland Freisler died with files in his hands. Papers flew out of windows and across streets like grey leaves. Some were burned. Some were taken. Some will be read again 3 decades later by students who do not believe that men like Karl can sit again in a courtroom. The Americans distribute forms. The form is called a questionnaire, the Fragebogen. It is the first mathematics after collapse. Each adult must answer. There are more than 100 questions. The occupation reports describe German reactions, fear, anger, resignation, improvisation. The Allied intelligence summaries use phrases like passive resistance and cooperative evasion. The documents ask for names, dates, memberships, donorships, promotions. They ask for alters and affiliations. They do not ask for alters and affiliations. They do not ask for conscience. Conscience is not a box to tick. Conscience is a notebook entry that cannot be shown. Karl receives a Fragebogen in January. He is living in a room with a window pasted with paper to keep out the drafts. He has found work carrying bricks on a municipal cleanup detail. He is not built for the work, but he is built for survival. He fills the questionnaire with neat script, using phrases he has heard on the street and from acquaintances who know what to say. Mitläufer, follower, Zwischenstellung, in between, formell, Mitgliedschaft, formal Mitgliedschaft, formal membership. He writes that he joined the party for his career. He writes that he never wore a uniform. He writes that he had never supported criminal acts. He writes that he protected defendants by applying the law cautiously. He writes that he was required by the oath. He obtains letters to support him. Persilshine. Little certificates of whiteness. A pastor signs one. A senior judge who lost his only son at Stalingrad signs another. The judge writes, Herr Westermann is a serious and honorable man who always treated defendants with correct deportment. Deportment is a word that can be translated into any language. It translates to nothing. The occupation authorities create Spruchkammern, denazification chambers, to handle the cases. The chambers sort people into categories. Major offenders, offenders, lesser offenders, followers, exonerated. In printed brochures, the categories look clean. In the files, they blur. The mathematics of guilt is strained by famine and the Cold War. The factories must run again. The trains must move. The arithmetic of manpower, one American officer writes in an occupation report, competes with the moral arithmetic of justice. People re-describe their pasts. They describe their motivations as hunger. They describe their oaths as compulsion. They describe meetings as administrative. They omit names that could ruin them. They emphasize sick parents, an apolitical wife, a dislike for uniforms. They erase enthusiasm. The files show the pattern. The language repeats. Just followed orders. No anti-Semitism. No ideological training. The hearings are performed in rooms full of shadows, municipal halls with cracked windows. There are no cameras. There are citizens on panels and there are Americans in the back. There are witness statements that hit like pebbles. He was strict but fair. He was not cruel. He blessed me with a cigarette when my son was arrested. There are other statements too. He called my neighbor a pig. He laughed in the corridor when sentences were announced. Memory is a weapon. Memory is also a refuge. The mathematics of testimony is not simple addition. It is algebra. Unknowns multiplied by fear. By late 1946, the categories harden again. The hunger winter is coming. The winter of 1946-47 kills more quietly than air raids. It kills in small rooms with broken stoves. Ration cards tell life expectancy in grams. Bread is a number. Fat is a number. Coal is a number. The arithmetic of hunger replaces the arithmetic of guilt. An American pack equals a week of work. The black market thrives behind church walls and in train stations. The police turn away. The mayor's office writes circulars about the need for order and is ignored. The men who once enforced racial laws now enforce bread lines. The women who carried rubble now sell clothes for potatoes. Carl stands in line with ration cards. He stands in line to submit his denazification file. He stands in line for coal. He stands in line for news. He reads the reports from Munich of a DP camp nearby at Feldafing on Lake Starnberg. He sees on a bulletin board a typed sheet, displaced persons. The camp holds Jews from Poland and Lithuania. It holds former forced laborers. It holds teenagers with tattooed numbers who will not look Germans in the eye. The camp is a world inside a fence. The Allies keep it separate for protection. The fence is thin. The stories carry across. There are moments when the Germans realize what was done in their name. There are moments when they pretend they already knew. There are moments when they do not want to know, and moments when they cannot stop knowing. The arithmetic of denial is quickened by cold and by shame. In an American military government memo, dated 21 January 1946, An officer notes that local Germans are both curious and evasive regarding DP camps. They do not press near the perimeter. In an oral history recorded years later, a woman from a village near the camp says, "We saw men with coats too large for them, as if borrowed from ghosts. We looked away." In February 1947, the Spruchkammer in Würzburg issues a decision on KW. He is a follower, Mitläufer. The chamber imposes a fine. The fine is payable in Reichsmarks that are worth less every day. The chamber prohibits him from holding public office until review. The restriction holds him out of the courtroom. It does not hold him out of the city hall. He finds work as a legal clerk in the housing office. He evaluates applications for rooms. He studies floor plans like case files. He decides which family of 4 can take a room with a window and which family of 5 can sleep in a corridor. The arithmetic of scarce rooms humiliates him. The arithmetic of small power excites him. Western towns already in ruins receive trains carrying more ruins. Expellees arrive from the east. They arrive from Silesia, from East Prussia, from the Sudetenland. Their numbers are millions. The mathematics of their bodies is a national equation. 12 million, 13 million, 14, depending on the source and definition. They carry everything they own in sacks. They carry documents that mean nothing anymore. The Bundesarchiv will hold petitions from these years that fill shelves. The petitions detail lost farms, lost machines, lost cows, lost apple trees. They use phrases like "nie wieder gut zu machen," impossible to make good again. Locals and newcomers watch each other like border guards. There is tension. The newcomers take rooms. The locals feel dispossessed in their own ruin. The newcomers form associations, Vertriebenen Verbände, with slogans about rights and return, while the locals mutter that the ones who supported the regime most loudly are now the loudest in claiming victimhood. The arithmetic of scarce food makes everyone suspect everyone else of stealing. Karl notes the faces of the expellees in his office. The women from Königsberg who speak differently, with a thinness that looks permanent. The man from Brunn with a diploma, asking for work beneath his status. The boy who will not sit. The arithmetic of files in the housing office is simple. Each file is a person reduced to a birth date, a former address, a number of plates and chairs, a number of beds. Each file is a small battlefield. The new order begins in rooms like his, with decisions written in pencil and then ink. The Allied occupation authorities release more reports. They write about the difficulty of denazification. They write about the necessity of stability. They write about the shift from punishment to productivity. The mathematics of the Cold War is beginning. In 1947, the Marshall Plan is announced. In 1948, the Deutsche Mark is introduced in the West. On 20 June 1948, new money arrives like rain. The black market collapses in a week. Shelves fill. Prices appear beneath products again. A factory whistle sounds in the morning like a hymn. Karl hears the new noise of the Wirtschaftswunder in the distance before he feels it in his pocket. He moves from the housing office to a legal department at a factory manufacturing machine parts. It is the same factory that had once made parts for tanks. Now it makes parts for tractors. The mathematics of retooling is not complicated. War metals become plow metals. A man who held a clipboard in a war economy holds a clipboard in a war economy, holds a clipboard in a cheptomol. The factory hires displaced persons who remain, and expellees and locals. The payroll is a map of the new Federal Republic before it has a name. He writes contracts, he reads foreign orders, he calculates liability. He writes to the Chamber of Commerce about a shipment delayed by a derailment in the British zone. He writes to the American military government to ask for permission to expand. The signatures on his letters bear the new names of old men. He recognizes them. He recognizes the handwriting of a former colleague from the prosecution office, now a director of legal affairs at a bank. He sees a man who wore a party pin, now wearing a clerk's tie. The names keep coming back around. In 1949, a state is declared without fanfare in many streets. The Basic Law is promulgated on 23 May 1949. The Bundesrepublik is a phrase that fits on tin signs. The American occupation becomes something else, a presence more than a command. The Americans keep bases. The Germans keep books. The courts open slowly. New judges are appointed. Old judges retire. Some old judges return. The federal bench, the Bundesgerichtshof in Karlsruhe, will be founded in 1950. The file cabinets begin to be labeled with the eagle again. The eagle faces the other way. Karl sees the advertisements. The Ministry of Justice in the state of Bavaria is seeking candidates with legal training who are not burdened with heavy guilt, as defined by Denazification law. He applies. He attaches copies of his Denazification decision. He attaches copies of the Persuasion. He includes a statement, "My conscience is clear that I have always attempted to apply the law justly." He does not mention the People's Court by name. He lists his years as public prosecutor in political matters. The words are an equation that minimizes the sum. The Sprüchkammern wind down. The occupation officials report a lack of personnel. The 131er will change the staffing landscape. In 1951, the Bundestag passes a law concerning civil servants who lost their positions between 1945 and 1949. Article 31. It is a restoration law. It allows the return of men who had served under the regime to civil service, if they are not considered guilty by the categories. It is a quiet law. It is a loud law in its consequences. It is the mathematics of continuity. By the early 1950s, the bench in the Federal Republic looks familiar. Many judges and prosecutors have resumes that include years before 1945. Some had joined the party out of opportunism. Some had believed. Some had refused and retired. Some had emigrated and do not return. The system needs continuity more than it needs cleansing. The files on the American side recognize this. An Allied intelligence summary, 1952, notes, significant percentage of judiciary and administrative elite composed of persons who served in similar capacities under National Socialism, vetting inadequate but politically expedient. Karl returns to the courthouse in 1952 as an assistant judge. He is assigned to property cases and restitution, to tenancy disputes and small claims. He learns the new words, Wiedergutmachung, compensation. The law's attempt to make good, to make whole, to write numbers against loss. There are claims for businesses Aryanized and seized. There are claims by Jewish survivors now living in DP camps or in America. There are claims filed by heirs. There are claims filed by lawyers for clients who cannot bear to see the street of their memory again. He hears a case in October 1953. A man named Singer claims a building sold under duress in 1938. The file includes a decree signature with a swastika watermark and a receipt that lists a price far below market. It includes a letter from 1942 written by a city clerk that says the buyer is reliable in the sense of the movement. It includes photographs taken with careful light to sell the property. The law now requires that property unjustly taken be returned or compensated. The law now gives judges words to measure injustice in currency. The defendant is a widow whose husband bought the building from the city during the war. She speaks of good faith. She speaks of 3 children. She speaks of her own expulsion from a village in Bohemia in 1945. She is a victim in one context and a beneficiary in another. The geometry of responsibility looks different from different angles. The arithmetic of suffering does not simplify legal equations. Carl writes a decision that morning and finishes it 6 weeks later. He follows the code. He lists the statutes. He cites the deadline that the plaintiff missed by 3 months according to the provisional restitution law. He denies the claim. He knows that this is a victory for legal certainty and a defeat for justice. The clerk in his chamber will remember this decision. The clerk will tell his daughter about it 2 decades later when students march. The clerk will say, "They followed the law." In his notebook that winter, Carl writes, "We build a new order from the stones of the old. The mortar is necessity." He does not add, "the stones remember." Public memory starts to settle in the early 1950s. School books discuss the past. Teachers handle it carefully. The narratives emphasize suffering from bombings. They emphasize expulsions. They emphasize the cold winters and the hunger. They emphasize that the worst men were a small group at the top. They emphasize the liberators who brought chocolate and chewing gum. They do not emphasize neighbors. They do not emphasize the People's Court. They do not emphasize names like his. The Bundesarchiv will later host exhibits showing how school books of the 1950s depicted the years 1933–1945. The images will show a parade without faces. The text will include lines about misuse of power by the National Socialist leadership. It will not include the names of prosecutors who wrote the words that became gallows. Carl learns to live with silence. He meets colleagues at conferences who wear their jackets like armor. He recognizes a man who once argued for a death sentence for a conductor who removed a portrait of the Führer from a piano hall. The man now writes articles about judicial independence. He recognizes another who refused to sit on a panel in 1938 and was demoted. That man sits alone at lunch. There are bargains that do not require words. There are moments when the new order requires new loyalties. In 1955, the Federal Republic joins NATO. In 1956, the Bundeswehr is created. The Cold War requires judges who will issue warrants in security cases. The arithmetic of loyalty shifts from brown to black, red, gold. The intelligence services, new and old, exchange names. The Office for the Protection of the Constitution opens a file under Carl's name because someone whispered he had worked for the People's Court. The file is thin. It contains a clipping, a denazification decision, a note, no further action. The file is closed. He rises. He is efficient. He does not speak about politics in public or much in private. He does not attend party meetings. He does not join clubs. He eats lunch with a small group and talks about case law and grandchildren. He wrings his hands when he hears about the East. He says, "Poor people," and means it and does not. In 1958, the Einsatzgruppen trial begins. For the first time, a West German court tries men for mass murder committed in the East. The proceedings are covered in the press. The press uses words like past and accountability. Carl reads about them and feels a pressure at the back of his neck. A young prosecutor in that trial is 10 years younger than Carl. He goes to synagogue to learn about his city. He reads archives that the Americans returned. He says on the radio that the law must be for the living and for the dead. He does not know Carl. He knows men like him. The files of the People's Court resurface in fragments. In an archive in Koblenz, there are lists. The lists are typed up by a researcher in 1959. The lists include signatures. They include initials. KW appears in the corner of a draft. The researcher publishes an article in a legal journal with footnotes like nails. The article has no names. It has initials. It is enough. Carl reads the journal and feels that a rope from another era is tugging at his coat. His superiors call him into a meeting in 1960. They ask about his past. He tells them. He tells them what is not asked. He tells them he wrote indictments in cases of breaking work, discipline and sabotage. He tells them he did not write indictments in racial matters. He tells them he tried to argue for lesser sentences. He tells them a story he can live with. They accept it. We all have such corners, one says, according to an oral recollection recorded in the 1990s. Corners are where shadows gather. He is appointed to the Bundesgerichtshof in Karlsruhe in 1962, the Federal Court of Justice. The building is new and clean. The staff are young. The caseload is heavy. The cases range from tax to homicide. They include appeals in restitution. They include appeals in security matters. He hears arguments about interpretation and procedure, about words and words. He enjoys the work. He is good at it. He writes opinions that are ambitious and cautious. He cites the basic law with reverence. He cites dignity. He cites freedom. He does not cite memory. At the end of 1963, the Frankfurt Auschwitz trials begin. Younger prosecutors present evidence in a courtroom that smells of varnish and fatigue. Survivors testify. The press writes their words across the country. There is a shudder in the West. Young people hear facts that their parents told them were exaggerated. Karl reads the newspaper during lunch and eats slowly. He thinks about a case he cannot forget, a young woman who distributed leaflets in 1943 and was charged with undermining military morale. He had drafted an indictment. The judge pronounced death. He remembers her name. He does not say it. In the evening, he writes in his notebook with a hand that trembles slightly. Her face returns to me at the sink. Soap bubbles. A face. He hears a case in 1965 that he will carry with him. It is an appeal in a defamation suit. A newspaper called a local official, a former Nazi judge. The official sued and won. The newspaper appealed. The appeal brings the question to Karl's chamber: when is the word former Nazi judge a matter of fact, and when is it defamation? The law requires balancing. The file includes the plaintiff's personnel file. It includes a letter from 1937 mentioning enthusiastic participation. It includes a denazification decision from 1948, follower. The mathematics of naming is dangerous. The opinion is cautious. The court allows the newspaper to say judge under National Socialism. It does not allow Nazi judge. Words are important. Words kill too. In 1968, students march in cities across the Republic. They march in Frankfurt. They march in Berlin. They march in Munich. They carry signs asking, "Where were you?" They stand outside the homes of professors and shout. They stand outside courthouses and chant, "Under the robes, the smell of 1,000 years." They publish pamphlets with names and photographs. They find photographs of Karl that are not photographs of him. They confuse men and situations. They get some things wrong and many things right. They force a generation to look. They call him a name he does not think fits: fascist. He wears the insult like a borrowed coat. It smells wrong. The mathematics of the Cold War continues, east and west. Berlin builds a wall in 1961. It stands in concrete and barbed wire and becomes a fact like a mountain. The arithmetic of risk is calculated in missiles and minutes. In this mathematics, judges like Karl are reliable. They will not waver. They will not ask too many questions. They will vote for budgets. They will keep secrets. They will interpret without trembling. Stability is a virtue for regimes built on fractures. In 1970, a chancellor kneels in Warsaw. Willy Brandt kneels at the memorial to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The photograph circulates in newspapers and becomes an icon and a wound. Carl sees the photograph in his office and closes the door. He stares at Brandt's foot on the cold ground. Brandt had not needed to kneel. Brandt had fled. Brandt had resisted. Brandt kneels for those who did not kneel. Carl stands alone in an office. He is not a man given to gestures. He picks up the telephone, then puts it down. He writes in his notebook. A gesture can carry a weight that law cannot carry. He goes back to work. He writes another opinion about prescription periods for restitution. He writes a note to a young clerk about the need to cite the precise issue number of the Bundesgesetzblatt. He walks to lunch alone. He returns to his office when he hears students chanting outside the building. He does not open the window. The files in the Bundesarchiv thicken. Researchers request boxes from his era. A journal publishes an essay in 1972 about the People's Court. The essay tracks careers. It shows percentages of prosecutors who later served as prosecutors in the Federal Republic. It shows that continuity was high. It shows that names matter. It draws a line from the Volksgerichtshof to the Bundesgerichtshof. The line is not straight. It is broken and crooked and real. The author writes, "The continuity of personnel in the West German justice system is a fact. Its moral evaluation remains contentious. Facts and values share a desk uneasily." Carl retires in 1974. He is 62. He declines a farewell party. He takes home a cardboard box with photographs of colleagues and a small bronze copy of the Scale of Justice. He leaves behind opinions and memos and files with his signature. He leaves behind a chair that will be filled by a man born after 1945. The transition is generational. The transition is slow. He moves quietly to a house in a suburb of Karlsruhe with hedges trimmed to German tolerances. He reads the paper. He reads history books. He reads an oral history collected by a student group that interviewed former prosecutors. He does not sign up. He writes in his notebook. He writes often in fragments. He writes often in fragments. He writes years. He writes names. He writes her face. He writes, "We changed the seals." In 1977, he travels to Würzburg to see what remains of his first years after the war. The city is rebuilt. The Residenz is whole. The streets are straightened. The stone is clean. The old housing office is now a modern building. The Trümmerfrauen are old. Some are dead. He walks past a school where children laugh at a teacher's joke without fear. He sits on a bench and watches. He writes, "The after-war is never over. The war after the war is within." He receives a letter from a university in 1978. A historian is writing about the People's Court and requests an interview. The letter is polite and precise. It includes a list of questions. It includes a reference to an archival file in which KW appears. It includes copies of 3 documents with his initials. He reads the letter twice. He places it under a book. He places it under a book. He places the book under another book. He returns home and takes the letter out again. He writes, "I will not speak because I will say too much." He opens a drawer and finds the old Denazification decision. It is yellowing. It lists him as a follower. It imposes a fine. The name of the chairman of the Spruchkammer is at the bottom. He remembers the room. He remembers the faces. He remembers the cold. He reads the words and hears the silence between letters. He thinks about those who left, those who had no files because they had no bodies. He thinks about the arithmetic of survival: subtract the dead, divide the ration cards, add the expellees, carry the guilt. He knows his life could be told with other words. He could say he was not the worst. He could say he tried to soften. He could say he never shouted. He could say he kept his head down. He could say he served the rule of law when the rule of law returned. He could say he wrote opinions that stood. All of these would be true. None would be enough. He writes again, "We changed the seals, not the hands." He adds, "The hands made and unmade many things." He does not absolve himself. He does not condemn himself. He does not allow his children to read the notebook. He does not destroy it. He hopes it will be read by someone who does not know him. The story of the judge who had once been a prosecutor is the story of a state that survived itself by repeating itself and then forgetting parts of the repetition. The People's Court is a name that is now a curse. The Federal Court is a name that is now a pride. The bridge between them is paperwork and years. The documents that carry names. The signatures that carry weight. In the late 1970s, new efforts to prosecute crimes from the past occur. The central office in Ludwigsburg sends inquiries. Files are assembled. Witnesses are found. Trials are held for low-level guards. The mathematics of time is cruel. The older the suspects, the worse the memory, the fewer the living witnesses. The sentences are light. The press writes about moral failure. The press writes about legal constraints. Both are true. The cold arithmetic of a statute of limitations will be an absolution no one celebrates, will be an absolution no one celebrates. Carl walks. He reads. He writes. He visits his wife's grave. He returns to the photograph of Brandt kneeling. He tries to imagine what it would mean for a judge to kneel. He decides it would mean little, except for the judge. He writes, "We had our rituals. We wore robes. We spoke Latin words. We nodded to portrait busts. We nodded to portrait busts. We told ourselves we were not the hangman." He does not forget the DP camp fence. He does not forget the hunger winter. He does not forget a bundle of papers with names and dates and the word death in the margin. He does not forget the expellee woman who cried in his office for a key that did not exist. He does not forget the smell of cigarette smoke in courtrooms after 1949 when the judges were new and the furniture was old. He does not forget the page in the Denazification file that called him a follower. He does not forget how relieved he was. His last notebook entry carries the date 8 May 1985. In the Republic, it is the 40th anniversary of the end of the war. The President of the Federal Republic gives a speech about liberation. The word liberation makes many people shift in their chairs. It is a correct word. It is a word that corrects memory. It is not a word that would have been spoken in 1949 without argument. Carl writes in a steady hand, "The front line after 1945 did not run across a field. It ran across my desk. It ran across my files. It ran through my sleep. We changed the seals, not the hands, and I have spent the war after the war learning the mathematics of that sentence."